Another Sunday version of Dualistic Unity Raw. These are always kind of fun, just because, of course, we've had a little bit of a break, I guess you could say, from talking to one another and talking to really any of the community for the most part. No, that's not true. I had 7 one-on-ones on Friday. I talked to 7 different members of the community on Friday, various different people, from people that we've known for a little while to people that I have never spoken to before, but have just recently listened to the podcast. I have to say, it's incredible to just be able to listen to everybody as they're having their different insights, and to see them coming into a state of mind where they're not trying to get anywhere. They're not coming to me with like "fix me" kind of intentions, but they're coming to me with questions, kind of like, I've been thinking about this, and I was just wondering what your thoughts were on this. And that is absolutely one of my favorite things to hear from somebody is, I was wondering what your thoughts were on this, not what's the answer, oh enlightened one, right? I love that shit. I really do, because when people come to the table and they're just like, you got to tell me how to fix myself. What am I supposed to do? And this is something that was common when I used to call myself a life coach, right? There's such a boundary on how much you can actually accomplish, because there's no sense of self-responsibility there. Right. And that's what you need to really make any progress whatsoever. And so it was just a really encouraging day. But aside from that, back to what I was rambling about earlier, the break that we get, I guess for me, it was Saturday, is just a time for self-reflection in a lot of ways, whether it's going out, whether it's staying home, going for a walk, meeting with friends, whatever it is. It's very much, in my opinion, from my experience, a chance to really just get back into it, what I'm doing at that specific time. And so I really enjoyed releasing the community topics episode on music this week. I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah, and don't let that title or topic fool you. It is a awesome episode. Like I went in with probably the lowest expectations I've ever had of a community topics, and it was really cool. Like Ray brought up a great point, and then we just kind of ran with that for the whole episode, and yeah, got pretty cool. So it was a great time. But yeah, so definitely check that one out. But it's cool interacting with just more and more people, and seeing the different insights coming through in different ways. And it kind of hit me, I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before. It was so funny, like when you're paying attention and like sensitive to reality, like fucking anything can turn into an insight and anything can take you down a path. Like I was watching a guy, I was walking over this bridge, and there was a guy who was like running uphill, and I saw it, and then it hit me that he was like doing it for himself, to improve himself. And it's like, obviously you look at the whole fucking scale, and it eventually I got to the scales of consciousness thing, and he going through it. This is a totally random dude going through, and he was a little bigger, and it was clear he was like working hard, working on himself. And like that is a required step to getting, be to a point where you can let go of yourself. Like you have to almost push through those stages of like courage and drive to get to a spot where you begin to let it go. Like for someone to go from apathy or fear, they can't skip over those parts. Like they're very much necessary. And it was just hitting me in a way, because with some of my videos, I've gotten to a point, I don't know, the last few months, where I try every time to like explain everything and just get people to like, you're it, you're God, you're reality. And I kind of discount the process sometimes, and the willingness to give a nudge as opposed to a massive shove. And so I have a number of things I want to talk about today, but yeah, it was funny just seeing a dude running up a hill, and I just was paying attention, and all of a sudden, like all of these insights like unraveled from just seeing that. And it hit me how much that's the case for anything when you're paying attention. And there's more on the paying attention part that I want to get into. But yeah, that was funny to see. And it happens more and more just when I'm in it. Like everything I see, every interaction, especially like human interaction, is very, very intriguing for sure.
I think it's interesting that you're saying, it's hard for me to not want to sit and try to explain everything. And what's funny is that we think we're trying to share knowledge, concepts, understanding, and all that, but it's the experience we're having when we're in that flow that we're really trying to share. It's how much we're in. It's like I'm trying to explain everything. It's like, are we trying to explain our widening experience of everything? Which we can't do. We can't explain the experience that we're having, right? All we can do is embody it and encourage people towards that experience themselves. And that's not by teaching them anything, but getting out of the way, which is how we're widening our own experience of awareness. So it's so very interesting. It's like, oh, here's all this information. It's like, oh, shit, hold on. How do I get you to relax? Right? How do I get you to get out of your own way? And that's why I like conversations about, God and division and all that stuff, because at the end of the day, it really does help in a lot of ways, particularly if you have religious programming and a lot of concerns regarding the afterlife and judgment, right? And so breaking all that crap down really does allow you to let that go, sit back and go, right, why would God judge itself? That seems fucking weird. And then that fear starts to dissipate, and now all of a sudden you're able to widen your awareness a bit more because you're not clutching so much, right? And that's why it's worth questioning things. But ultimately, it's just the experience of widening our awareness and seeing all of these considerations more and more and more and more and more. And in that, we just sit in awe of everything. And that's what we want to communicate to people. That's what we're trying to get across, where we're like, oh, I got to make a video about this. But if you did it like that, in that state, you would just keep talking. This is why my old YouTube videos were like 10 minutes long, and I struggled to keep them under 10 minutes, was because there was just so much. You want to keep talking about it because it's beautiful. It's a wonderful experience. It's so light. It's so freeing. There's so much in terms of just this ongoing flow of awe-inspiring insight. And yet you try to break it down and communicate it to someone, and it always comes out as this, terribly packaged, limited version of what it is. And it's never taken the way that you want it to be, because it's not coming in a way that it can be taken that way. This is why I always just try and get people to remember, just relax. Like if they're like, yeah, well, what about this? Just chill. Let's just relax first. You want a beer? Like just let's start from there if we can, because this, needing to be right, this argumentative stance is rarely productive. Like it honestly, it gets to the point where one side is just trying to be right over the other side at the expense of the entire thing moving forward, right? Which is politics in a nutshell.
Yeah, no, that spot of the relaxation and being willing to express that, it is interesting because it's like the balance between maintaining it and sharing it, and not, because if you have a drive to share it, that's not really being in it the same way. Like the push, I want to make this video to share this, or I wish this person was more relaxed. It really just has to be you doing it, and putting yourself in situations like, on a podcast, making a video, whatever, but just leaving it at that and just being willing to share that experience. Because if there's too much like push or should, or I want this person to be in this spot, then it's bastardized. Like it's kind of fucked. Like it's not that experience being shared. And so it's so interesting to have that. And this brings me to one of the things I want to bring up. This is just like a quick little example, kind of related to this. Yesterday, I ate a little bit of mushrooms, and I was, and so at our first retreat, I had some and just smoked, and it was like the first time I kind of saw the void or the abyss, and I stayed away from combining weed and mushrooms. I was like, I was shaken after that. And so it's funny. Yesterday I ate some, and it was pretty much same amount I did that day back in last November. And then I just smoked a bunch of weed after. And it was kind of the mindset of like, bring it. Let's see. I can, no matter how high I get, I can handle it. And it took me for a ride. There was a point where there was definitely some paranoia arising, and it was because I was walking around. I'm in Austin right now, just kind of walking around, and there was the feeling of towards the end, like being watched almost or followed or something. That's where it kind of took it. But earlier on in the trip, it was hitting me how, and I this is not the initial example I was going to bring up, but I'm just going to keep going because this is something else I wanted to bring up with concepts aren't truth. Like that hit me in a different way because like it hit me how imperative it is to remember that concepts aren't truth, because reality, there is infinite potential. And so every idea of a situation, every potential hypothetical situation is a component of reality. Like that is a, like an, you could call it alternate reality or something like that. And so it's almost to stay, like I say stay, but it's not really that, to remain paying attention to the reality that is, as opposed to the infinite potential. You have to maintain concepts not being truth, because as soon as they are, there is infinite potential, like other realities you can experience. And so paying attention really is paying attention to this reality. And when you're not, I might have a sneeze coming. Hold
Ladies and gentlemen, that sneeze brought to you by Patreon.
on. Patreon 7-day free trial. Check it out. Patreon.com/dualistic. But so the paying attention part and the consequences of not paying attention, like it really is when you're caught in your idea of yourself, in a judgment of a situation, in an opinion of a situation, it's like you're experiencing an alternate reality that isn't this. And so it's like, and even just from some fucking like Dolores Cannon shit, like coming to earth sort of thing, even from that perspective, because this is kind of how I was translating it in like the mission to come to earth. It's like that would be the number one rule in the experience of infinite potential, of infinite realities here and now, is concepts aren't truth. Like we got to maintain that one, because if we lose that one, we're fucked. Like, because then everyone's going to be experiencing different realities. They're not going to be experiencing what is. They're not going to be experiencing this reality here and now. And there's consequences to not paying attention when you are this reality and you're not paying attention to this reality. And it's not just physical consequences of like, you're not paying attention crossing the street and almost get hit by a car, but it's because you're paying attention to alternate realities. You're, afraid and worried and, depressed. And those are also consequences of not paying attention to the reality that is, to what is, to this, like this reality. But at the same time, and this is what was hitting me, like I was feeling a lot in that one yesterday. And it was like, I was seeing how they were all the different, different realities weren't different realities. They were this reality, but the attention needs to be paid to what is, or else there's inevitable consequences. And that's kind of, as a collective, we're just not paying attention. Like, we're just not paying attention to this reality. We've gotten kind of caught in experiencing like other dimensions, kind of like other realities that aren't this here now. So yeah, that was one of the things that was hitting me pretty hard.
That's great. That's awesome. Yeah, it's kind of, so it's funny because we're existing in two different experiences at the same time. It's kind of like behind us is the potentiality of everything that could be, and in front of us is a variation of that. And in that variation is the potential for everything that could be. So no, it doesn't matter what you look at, you can just keep looking at more and more and more of what it could be, where it came from, where it might go. Like, it's all in there. It's just kind of in a freeze frame of potential. And you can see beyond what's there, but you're doing that from what's behind. Right. And so it's kind of like we're an hourglass. And what I mean is that everything on the top of the hourglass is the sheer potentiality. And then it comes to a pinch, which is us and our awareness. And then it's expressed as one potential thing out of that entire possibility spectrum, as it were. And so, yeah, I'd say that the trick is remembering what you're embodying, which is this experience. You're embodying this experience. You can get really lost in the potential of everything it could be, which is ultimately closer to the void, right? The original, like the place that we came from, the place that we're going, the place that will always be, right? The sheer potentiality of everything. But this experience is that one variation, right? Now, what's interesting about that is that you can get lost in the potentiality to the point where you're not paying attention to what's happening here. And you can get so lost in that you can get either on the deep end towards depression, or on the other end towards self-involvement in your own narrative, as it were. And it causes more conflict and destruction and so on and so forth, because it's divisive to do so. Or not do that. Or you can pay attention to what's actually happening in the here and now, increasingly so by recognizing that all of those things are not necessarily indicative of a lessening or a raising of your value. So they're not worth worrying about, in other words. And so you really can focus on the here and now and what you're doing in a more unifying way, right? Reflecting more of a recognition of unity. And then all of the impact that you have changes accordingly, right? And so it's kind of the same thing. It's like, how much are you reaching into the all of everything that you could be? And how much is it overwhelming you? Versus how much are you balancing the all of everything you could be with the all of everything you are right now?
So it's like the less we're paying attention, the less impact potential influence or impact that we can have here and now. So yeah, it's because it was kind of hitting me like as I was like getting really, really high, just how those things were all variations, like every potential situation that came into my head. And this was after it hit me how like concepts aren't truth. And that's what it was like, that was earlier on. And then it was hit me where I was like using that insight, like concepts aren't truth. Yes, there is potential variations. Like, yes, there is a situation where someone's fucking like following you for a mile and there's this whole sort of convergence upon you. Like, it was so interesting because that was towards the end of it. And I got through it fine, but it was like a good 30-40 minutes where I was like seeing people as, potentially coming after me, and it got into that for a bit. And it was just like, yeah, in the infinite potential of what could be, that is a situation. But again, concepts aren't truth. Like, pay attention, just pay attention, just pay attention. That's all you got to do. And so I just kept paying attention, and it worked through. Like, it was kind of freaky for a little, but there wasn't the deep concern of it necessarily. But yeah, even aside from that, like I was seeing everyone because I was walking around the city, and it was of Austin, and it was a Saturday, and it was there was a decent amount of people out, and it was like I was like experiencing them as well as me, sort of, and not in any way of like, in their body, moving around like a fucking robot, but based on just the subtlest ways that they looked at people and interacted. I was seeing like how everyone is acting coming from somewhere, like coming from some assumptions about themselves and about reality and about things that's dictating and driving all of their behavior, like all of it. And it's just that. And so the way to it's not even a getting beyond that, because it's still everything I do is from things that I've been through and experienced, and it all has impact. But the less seriously you take the story, the less seriously you take the concern. Even there's less of the impact from the assumptions that are made. And so I was feeling that, but then again, the trips now, it's not just, it's so funny because early on it was like, oh, mushrooms, greatest thing ever. And now it's like, it's not just Andrew. It's because I'm not just Andrew. And when you're in that spot where you're seeing everyone and everything as you, like that, your trips become like all encompassing almost. And so it was just sitting through it and just moving through it, not even sitting through it, because that is like makes this idea that it was passive or something, but it's just kind of walking through yourself, watching it, and I was just paying really fucking close attention. Like I could hear conversations down the block almost like that. It was like the noises I could hear so much more. It was crazy just because I was paying attention. Then I'd get caught up in some concern or narrative or whatever, and it would quiet down. Like I wouldn't, and then I would relax through that. And then it was like I was hearing so much more, seeing more too, even like looking beyond my immediate kind of spot on the street I was to more like looking up and yeah, but it was just a lot of feeling what everyone's going through. And I saw them, and this always sounds to me weird when I say it, but they like weren't people in the same way. They were very, very symbolic of just different expressions of variations of different mentalities, basically. And like the way that they spoke and interacted and just the things they did. It's not that they didn't have any control, but it kind of is like they're playing out a variation where they of course have free will, but in a way like they're just playing out a mentality as opposed to like being a separate human being that's totally separate from everything, just kind of doing their thing and saying their stuff. Yeah, that was.
And if they were experiencing that level of clarity, they would have perceived you to be doing exactly the same because it's all wonderfully seamless. But it's funny because as you were describing this experience, I couldn't help but think to our movie review of Kung Fu Panda, that the dragon warrior will see light in the darkest cave and hear the flap of a butterfly's wings, that he can survive off the dew of a single ginkgo leaf. And it's because he's paying attention. Right? But this brings up something that was addressed or commented on in one of your Instagram videos recently, and I wanted to bring this up because it ties very much to what we were saying. May I ask what you're viewing reality through, if not your perception? And I thought this was a great question for the simple fact that there's the kick in the teeth. Sorry, what are you viewing? Like you're using the word view, but immediately there's this idea that you're viewing something, that there isn't in fact something to perceive. You are experiencing perception, but you're not viewing anything because it's just you. So that's the difference, is in recognizing that the perception's not the reality, that the reality is what you are. And so that is an entirely different way of experiencing reality. You're actually in it. But this idea like, oh, what reality is just what you perceive, that's a trap. Because there's two things happening there. One, the belief in your perception, which is immediately something to be questionable about. And the other is the idea that you're perceiving something at all. That's the danger, right? Because right there, you immediately assume a division between observer and observed. And that's what I responded to the person. I'm like, you seem to be perceiving a difference. Like, no, why would you say that? Why don't you explain it with more nuance? I'm like, check out the podcast. The podcast is more nuance.
Exactly. It's always funny when you go back and forth. So, like there should be more expression of the nuance or the gray area or whatever. And it's like, what do you like? Yeah, if you want to go down that road, this video is going to be 25 minutes. And that's why we have podcast episodes. That's why we have 225, 230 some odd episodes going into all of the nuance, because there's so much gray area. There's so much of that to explore. And so, yeah. And I've gotten a little bit better recently about being willing to leave things. I don't know, almost, I feel like they're unfinished in a way, the videos, but just with insights, there's a part of me, and there has been for a little while now, where I just want to cover every component and not leave any like holes in the argument, and just over explain almost. And you got to be willing to just give that nudge, not, and again, it's not even, as we were saying before, it's not even explaining anything. It's just expressing something, and those with ears to hear will hear. And that's what has been hitting me more too with the comment sections, because I've been having some fun with those. Is just how people don't want to, I don't know, they're not willing to look in a way, and you get to a spot where it's like, hey, if you don't want to look at this, I can't force you to move your head and look at it. Like, I can only do so much. And they're like, oh, that sounds like a nice cop out for you. Like, oh, you can't handle the conversation anymore. And it's like, you don't want to have the conversation. We're not having any conversation here. You're just trying to keep putting things back on me so you can avoid the conversation. You keep avoiding the conversation. But yeah, it's I've gotten that statement or in conversations a few times, just where people are like, oh, my perception is reality. And there's just, I'm realizing now even how much depth of an assumption, like how many assumptions come with that, of a perception of division, of a me that is separate, of I'm not just looking at myself, of all of these things, all of these spots that we're kind of settling on, and we're not willing to look because we're just settling on the most basic shit, and we just don't want to ask any question. We don't want to be like, well, maybe that's not it, because that opens up the door to everything. So we just avoid questioning anything, and we just and we've gotten to a spot now where it's like there's so little questioning, so many assumptions built on top of itself, that you do ask some questions and people are like, call you disrespectful and will say like, yeah, you shouldn't be doing that. Why do you have to do? Come on. Especially like religion. Religion helps some people. It's like, Jesus, religion's one of the most destructive things, if not the most destructive thing that I've
It came
ever
from questioning reality.
experienced. Yeah, exactly.
Like that's the whole thing. They're like, why do you got to go questioning existence and all that? It's like, why can't you just believe in this fiction that we came up with from questioning existence several thousand years ago? So not actually me, but other people. And they came up with good stuff. You think you're better than them, and they get all defensive about it. It's funny.
It is. It's that's so funny because that's where it all came from. And then we just stopped. We're like, okay, I'll just believe this. And we're not even, it's not even the same thing. Like the reality of everything Jesus was saying and Christianity aren't even, there's not even overlap whatsoever. It's like they took it, put it in like this machine and fucked it all up and then spit out this in like a package. And it was like, here you go. Just look at this and just believe this. And it has like, you know, image of Jesus, white Jesus. And just look at this. And it didn't come from that. Like that's not, that won't, those weren't the inputs to that machine that spit out just Christianity. There was so much to it. And we just don't want to do that again almost. We're like, oh, we've done the questioning and we got to this and this is it. And it's not even like it came from the same thing. Like it's a product of what was being looked at. And it's just gotten so, I mean, it died the second it was conceptualized, but it's so dead now. It's not even like a skeleton. It's like a disintegrated skeleton of dust that has now been blown away. So it's like it's not even there anymore. We just keep pointing to it.
I'd like to take a moment to just go back for a second and appreciate the machine that spit out Christianity. Because that's great. That's exactly it. That's the ego. That's the machine that spits out all our stupid shit. We put good insights in, it spits out fucking crap, right? And it's just because it's badly built. It's made to protect itself, not necessarily produce quality work, right? So what it spits out is feed me more, protect me. Rather than anything fucking useful. We could have just taken the original insight and, you know, sat on it rather than like, tell me what this means about me. And then the machine does. And we wonder why it's all fucked up. I just wanted to appreciate that. The machine that spit out Christianity. That's great.
That's funny. Yeah, no idea where it came from. As always, you know, came from me. But yeah, I've never thought about it like that at all. Even before I said it, I was like, does that make sense? Yeah, I guess it does. But that's what it seems like is there's all of this work being done and it goes in and yeah, the machine is the ego. How can I spin this into allowing me to feel better, allowing me to have more false certainty, allowing me to, you know, identify with more things, solidify my conceptual idea of myself that doesn't actually exist. Like, what are all the things that I can do? And so it just turns it into that. And so Christianity is just the ego's desire to derive certainty from uncertainty, like certainty from just the willingness to look at reality and talk about reality and discuss reality and question reality. And it spun that. It's like, how can we turn this into something that means something about me that I can hold on to, that I can, you know, can soothe a bit of my fear of death and not actually do it at all, because most Christians are still super afraid of death, despite holding on to that just hope. And yeah, and then it spit out all of it, and it's all belief. It's any belief, like any of it is just the spit out product that we can now hold on to and defend and cling and, like, you know, keep in a vault in our house and just, all right, I can keep that there. Meanwhile, it's like eating the house from the inside and distorting our entire experience. But we think that that's what's helping us. It's like kryptonite that we think is beneficial, and it's just slowly crippling and killing us. Literally, I mean, as we perceive ourselves as what we think we are, we do die. And like, that's not even a real thing that happens to the reality of you. So it is kind of doing all that stuff in a way.
Yeah, I love the fact that Christianity has managed to reduce the ineffable to a dude named Jesus. I think it's fucking awesome. We had a comment here earlier, and I don't know what it was regarding. The way you describe this is the way I would describe experiencing bipolar. I'm going to assume what they're talking about is like the wide spectrum of potential possibilities that you could perceive things within. Here's the thing. We're all able to access that. That's what we are, as long as we're willing to. And the swinging back and forth is the behavior that is typically categorized as bipolar, because you're going back and forth. But the problem is that saying, oh, you just have bipolar, unfortunately reinforces the problem, because now you're just like, oh, I'm just swinging because I have bipolar. Whereas in that experience of swinging, on the one end, being super depressed, let's just say, you still have the capacity to question the experience. You still have the capacity to reduce the influence that experience has on you by learning to sit through it, to not resist it, to not run from it, to understand its triggers, to understand where it comes from, the influence, the whole thing. And then when you swing the other way, you have the potential to once again question the experience. Rather than having a really manic high, you can say, oh, wow, okay, I'm getting overcommitted to this, or I'm not paying attention to certain things. Maybe I'm getting carried away. Maybe I'm overextending. These are all things that you can do with awareness if you really want to. So the whole thing about bipolar is that largely it's irresponsibility and a lack of awareness, and perhaps a little bit too much pace. And usually that comes from overcommitment to the mentality that causes a lot of bipolar, which is chasing the carrot and running from the stick. Right? The more desperate you are to escape your suffering, the faster you're moving, which makes it even harder to pay attention to the things that are creating your suffering. Right? So I just wanted to mention very quickly that we are all always accessing the infinite spectrum of what it is. Some of us stick within within a certain pocket of it, out of fear and out of maybe trauma and conditioning, and some of us are just bouncing around in there, wondering what the fuck is going on, because we don't have anyone around us having a rational conversation about it without putting us in a category and saying, you have this, rather than saying you are exhibiting these behaviors, which is a very different thing to say to people.
And continuing on with that, the machine example too, like there's certain behavior patterns, certain things, just experiencing the vastness of the spectrum, the entirety of the spectrum. And then we shove that through the machine and it spits out something like bipolar or something like, PTSD. And I'm not saying those aren't experiences, but our labeling of it isn't the experience itself. And it's that shift from before the machine to after the machine. Is before the machine, it's uncertainty, it's paying attention, it's the willingness to just ride it out, and the almost like continued change of the experience. Whereas we start getting uncomfortable with that. We're like, I got to push this through the machine. I got to figure out what this means about me. The concern sets in, and then we settle upon, we get a label. It's now false certainty. We now don't have to pay attention so much to it, but then we're not, because we just continue maintaining that, like we're not experiencing the changes that are always happening before we conceptualize it, before we identify with it. And so by identifying with it, it kind of keeps us stuck in it in a way. Whereas without the identity, we would just continue to move through it, and it would almost level out naturally, just being willing to sit in it. And you would still experience the vastness of the spectrum, but it wouldn't be this underlying idea that there's something wrong with you. Like there, as soon as the label gets brought in, as soon as the identity gets brought in, it's like, I have this, there's something wrong with me. And just that assumption that there's something wrong that needs to be worked on. It's like that's where your attention is, and you're not paying attention to this reality. And there's inevitably going to be more consequences, as always, to not paying attention. And so that's settling upon that, even identifying as that is like experiencing a variation of reality that isn't what is here and now. Oh.
Andrew's having a spring day. It's allergy season. We should get a sponsor, Reactin or something, just the sake of it.
Right? Yeah. No, I haven't sneezed in fucking months. I feel like, and now I'm just getting smacked. It must be something, I guess. Maybe some springtime stuff, but yeah, I don't know. But yeah. Anyway, I have more things that I wanted to bring up if you're cool.
I am absolutely cool with it as always. I do want to take just a brief moment though to mention a few things Dualistic Unity specific. First, our Vermont retreat is sold out. I'm very excited to say that we have all of the guests arranged, and a few of them I've known and spoken with on our Patreon groups for a long time, and I've never had the opportunity to meet. So I am ecstatic. A couple of them I spoke in the last few days too, and I just wanted to say this is going to be awesome. If you are not coming to the Netherlands retreat, do consider coming to the Netherlands retreat, because this is going to be fucking amazing. 34 community members are going to be there, not counting Andrew and myself. So this is going to be the biggest Dualistic Unity community event to date. It's going to be just an incredible experience. We would love for you to be there. I'm going to be absolutely in my element, in that I'm going to know nothing about where I am, about the language, the geography, nothing. I'm totally going to be in the unknown, which is exactly where I feel the most comfortable. So I really hope that you can join us, because it's just going to be a blast. I would love to meet you there for sure. Second, and then I'll move it on and pass it back to Andrew. The Colorado retreat is coming up. I'm going to be in Colorado, in Denver, Colorado, as of this Friday, which is super exciting. I'm stoked, but I wanted to mention the Wednesday following, June 14th, Andrew and I are going to be doing karaoke at a bar in Denver. So Wednesday night, karaoke, bar in Denver, probably around 9 o'clock. We would love to see you there. We're going to announce the location probably later this morning on Patreon. If you can join us, patreon.com/dualistic unity. There is a 7-day free trial now, so you have no excuse not to give it a shot. We do groups 5 days a week, so it's worth it. Definitely give it a shot. You can chat with us, and you can ask us where we're going to be doing karaoke. Otherwise, we will be announcing it on social media on the night of June 14th, so you can just keep an eye out there. But yeah, come sing with us. It's going to be fucking awesome. It's going to be a blast, and we'd love to see you.
Oh yeah, I'm pumped for the karaoke. I've been able to get a little bit in Austin. There's one near me, but yeah, if we could pack the house with Dualistic Unity people, that would be incredible to have a night like that, because it's just, there's something about karaoke. It's just a great time, being willing to let your guard down and just put yourself out there, and no, there's no judgment whatsoever. It is funny when you go though, when there are because sometimes there are judgmental people, and it's just so funny to see. It's like, oh man, like you almost just want to put your arm around them and be like, are you doing all right? Like, you're at karaoke and you're being a judgmental prick. Like, are you sure you're okay? And it's because it's just so obvious in that spot when everyone's kind of like sharing stuff, people are going up, and not everyone's a very good singer, and then it's funny, like I saw some people the other night when I was there who were like kind of being judgmental, like, oh, it's so tough, because it's just so clear that it's coming from them. Like it's so interesting. But yeah, the retreats, Colorado, Vermont, holy shit. It's I mean, the group chats are amazing always on Patreon, but there is a much different experience being in person. Like the the geo proximity is definitely a thing that makes a big difference. As much as we can feel, which we do oftentimes feel, that sort of connection on the Patreon calls, like it's a lot different in person. So yeah, if you weren't able to get a spot to Colorado or Vermont, the Netherlands is going to be a blast. And yeah, November. Yeah, it's going to be so much fun. 34 people on a massive estate, basically hour and a half outside Amsterdam. Just going to be beautiful. Going to be probably, I guess, like fall weather, I guess, which is probably gorgeous in that part of the world. So it's going to be amazing. And it's going to be fun because you've never been to Europe, right? So Ray's first time in Europe. It's going to be, yeah, just going to be a blast.
Yes, come experience that with me. Absolutely. Because I'm goofy and weird as it is. So you can just imagine what it's like on a genuine adventure with me. That, and there is a wood heated hot tub, which I'm fucking stoked for, because that sounds just delightful in the fall. And I have to say, I'm a big fan of fall. I really am, because you get the benefit of walking outside, either in the morning where it's a little crisp, or in the afternoon where it's, you know, a little warmer, or you could stay inside where it's snuggly and there's fireplaces and there's just lots of seating, and there's lots of places for us to just break into little pockets of insightful people, and then just gravitate to other pockets of insightful people. We'll be like the synapses in a brain, but all within one lodge that's designed for us all to live comfortably. There are a bunch of different tickets. There are semi-private rooms. There are shared rooms where the price is way lower. It's less than $2,000 for one of the shared rooms, and that includes all your meals for the entire 9-day retreat. Please do realize this is November 11th to 19th. It's a long retreat. You're with us for a bit. It's a fucking journey. And at the end of it, we are going to know each other about as best as we can, considering I'm going to be putting all of the attention I have into every moment I'm there. And if you're a part of that moment, that means you. So I do hope that you can join us. And that was it for the announcements. And I'm going to pass it back to Andrew, who still had some things to say before we wrap up this episode of Raw.
Yeah, the last thing on the retreats, the connections made are pretty incredible, because as much as, yeah, it's 9 days, but it doesn't feel like 9 days. It does not feel like 9 days. Like I can't emphasize that enough. It feels like a couple months. It really does. And it's crazy. And you can have those, I feel like you get glimpses of those types of experiences here and there. You're in a certain situation where you're just like fully involved in it, paying very, very close attention, and it lasts 30 minutes and it feels like 3 hours. That's pretty much the retreats, and they kind of compound on each other each day. So like the longer it goes, the longer it feels in a way. And so it really does feel like just experiencing eternity together in the most relaxing, fun, enjoyable environment as you possibly could. Basically, it's just the perfect environment for that experience of just exploring yourself, sitting with yourself in eternity with a bunch of people who are doing the same thing and recognizing that you are them. So yeah, couldn't be more excited about that. But yeah, I do have a couple other insights I wanted to get through. So one of while I was walking around, eventually was a little hungry, but I was still really, really high. And I walked past this ice cream shop, and I had passed it before, and it was like, oh, I want to check that out before I leave. And so part of me was like, I'm like really high to be going in this right now, and you know, the process of ordering, and I was like, fuck that noise, I'm going in, whatever. And then I was there, and we've talked about this before, but I had never felt it in this way of like getting myself's attention. Like we've talked about, and Ray's talked about how walks around just being free and weird, just for people to look and be like, like, what's that guy seeing? What's that guy doing? I'm curious about that experience. And so I was kind of having that thought in the ice cream shop, and I was looking at the flavors, and I was like, I usually gravitate towards like the cookie brownie stuff as opposed to the fruitier stuff. And I was like, what could potentially have the most impact here? Because I was just like very deep in it. Like everyone was me. I was just walking through myself. There was no other people whatsoever. And so the girl working behind the counter, I was like, all right, maybe this'll be to the extent of this situation that I could get someone to just be a little bit curious. And so I just asked her, like, what's your favorite flavors? And she was like, I like the gooey butter cake, but I also kind of like strawberry. I don't know. And they kind of pair well together. And I was like, give me that. And that was it. And so it was so interesting because I've never thought about it in that way. Because to have that where everyone goes into a shop and they have their favorite flavor or whatever, they pick it or they ask, they try some stuff. They're like, I'm going to go with that. And we like to think that there's a certainty of I get this and I'm going to enjoy this. And you have no idea. And I used to do this when I was younger. Like when I was really young, my grandma for our birthday would like take us to a toy store, and when I was like 5 or something. And I would fucking walk around that place for so long, just trying to find the perfect toy or whatever. And you never really know how it's going to play out, like what you're going to enjoy. And so going into a situation, be it, fucking ice cream shop or a restaurant, just asking like, what's your favorite thing? And just getting that, because that is the same amount of certainty as you have if you mull over and pick something you think you're definitely going to like. And so I found it interesting how every situation you can make the most of it in the sense of doing something that's not for yourself. Like it's not so involved in yourself, because there's a part that's like, well, I'm getting this ice cream. I want to enjoy it. I want to get what I like. And it's like, no, just kind of put it out there. And so who knows how she responded. She was a little bit like, when I was just like, yeah, I'll have that. She was like, oh, okay. And then she got it. And so there's the opportunity to just see that, like there's a degree of connection there that wouldn't have happened if I had just been like, give me the chocolate and that. And there was like a communication there and conversation that happened. So I just found that interesting, that I was just like, because there was also a part of me where I was paying, like I was so sensitive to everything that there was starting to be the inkling of, oh, I'm being like guided in a way. And it's not like it's wrong, but it's also guided by what, Andrew? Like, what are you being guided by? It's all you. There is no thing guiding you. It's just you paying attention and having a sensitivity where you're like so much more aware that there's more, almost like more options available. You're seeing more of the spectrum. It's not just this limited thing. So because of that, you're taking more in and making more informed decisions, and just the information that is being taken in from paying attention is like guiding you, but it's not guiding you because you're still the one doing all of it and paying the attention and all the things that you're paying attention to. And so there was just so much sensitivity to every movement having impact on myself that I think people can kind of get overwhelmed by that. They can sit in a spot where they're like, everything I do has impact, and they take it down and that's scary. What do I do? It's like, you can't escape that though. You can't leave the impact that you have, but the more you pay attention, like you can have like a degree of influence that's more just because you're taking in more. It's not because oh, I'm recognizing this, and therefore I just like more influence is placed upon me. It's that influence is a product of just because you're willing to sit and take in so much more, there's inevitably going to be more influence had because there's more taken in.
There's more vulnerability, right? Like that's the thing. You're taking in all the different perceptions, but you're not settling on one. And then what's interesting is the decision that you decided to go with was the most counterintuitive one, which was you choose. Right. Which I love. I love that in general. Or is the one you've always kind of been curious about, but not wanted to try. That kind of thing. Like, let's do this together. That kind of thing. But that's the thing. You can get really caught in that, or you can just work your way through it. But I liked what you were saying. Guided by what? And it's like guided through what? Right? The experience of yourself. Because that's what this is, right? It's just that you're letting go of the banks of the river. Right, you're just flowing through it, aware of the river, because of course you would be once you had committed to being in the flow. You're more aware of that flow and all of the different currents within that flow, right? But that's it. It's just going through it, and it's an incredible feeling. It really is. It's very freeing, but it's also where you're less inclined to go towards the habitual. You're more inclined to go towards the new and the unexperienced, right? Because why the hell not? Whereas in the other mentality, you're clinging to the bank. This is familiar. I want to stay here. Right. Oh, that next branch looks familiar. I'll move to that very slowly, right? And work my way down the river that way. But it's always just in what feels familiar. Whereas when you're in the flow, you're just like, familiar. What does that mean? Like every moment's a different part of the flow, and you just kind of go with it.
Like there is no familiar, like everything's so fresh because there isn't anything else. Like you're paying attention to just reality, and there's a fullness of that experience that of fucking this experience. I'm saying that experience as if it's something else. There's a fullness to this experience when you are paying attention. Like there's nothing else to live for. Like we get caught in living for things, and that's not living. Like living for something, believing in something, all of that stuff, trying to get somewhere isn't living. Like we've almost lost the experience of living, of truly living for the sake of doing so. And it's that childlike mentality of just playing, of not being concerned about where you're getting or where you're going. And then our ideas kick in, and then we have an idea of where we should get. And then we measure our progress based on how quickly or how well we're getting there.
Bam. Instant anxiety and indecision. That's what it is. That's really what it is. And this is why, and you've come to a restaurant with me. I'll look for the menu. I'll look at the menu until I've decided that's about long enough. And then I'll just settle on something. And that's my thought process. It's like, I'm going to look at all the options. Oh, wow, this is taking a long time. That one. And then I'll move on. Right. But it's not, that's going to be the best one. It's just, this is about as much time as I'm willing to commit to this process. Shoot from the hip. Going with the fucking crispy chicken, that kind of thing. And it's just because that's where you're going. But we overthink it. We're like, there's a right decision. There's a meal. If I choose it, it's going to be the best possible meal that I could have out of all the other meals. And we actually do decide that to ourselves. And we put a lot on that. And then if it comes, it's not quite right, we get all pissed off. Why am I paying for this? Whereas you could have picked something you've never had before, had no expectations of, just shut the fuck up, enjoyed the meal, and actually learn to taste and appreciate something entirely new. But instead you're focusing on your preferences, which is making everything really, really intense in terms of it's got to meet my preferences. If it doesn't meet my preferences, it's lower than my preferences, which means it's not good. Right? It's a shitty scale to live within, but we do it all the time.
Like we experience it through our expectation of it. And when you have a certain meal that you like, and it's interesting to see that with people who the expression of a given mentality of the false certainty, like someone who goes to a restaurant and like clockwork orders the same thing every single meal versus someone who goes and orders something different every single time. And like that and I'm not saying that one is right or wrong, but there's an expression of, the exploration to a degree. And so it's interesting when people just settle into routine. Basically, they settle into, this is just what I've always enjoyed, and therefore it's what I'm always going to enjoy. And so it can get to a spot, if you've had the same meal every day for a year, or not even that, a week, it's like you're not even tasting it anymore. And it's the same with any situation, with life in general. Like, you're not really experiencing it when you continue to maintain the habits, which like hinders you from being able to fully pay attention to reality. But the more you pay attention, the less those habits have. And it's like a sliding scale of attention to lack of attention, to the habitual, to letting go of the habitual. Like, you're either reinforcing the habitual, or you're questioning it and working through it, which that process of working through it isn't necessarily going to be comfortable. There's going to be varying degrees of it. But when there's a shift, like out of a habit, there's going to be a discomfort with that change, because it's a shifting. It's like tapping back into what's actually happening. And it can be kind of jarring, getting slid back into that spot. But with the habits, we're either reinforcing them or working through them. But I find it funny how people will just stick to a routine, and it's always, it's even, I guess it depends on your priorities too, because there can be the routine of, the simplicity of wearing the same shirt every day. And that, yes, that is habitual, but it's almost in a different category, I feel like. But at the same time, I guess it is the same category. It's just how close to the reality of your experience it is. Yeah, I don't really know where.
I think it comes to resistance to change. Like, if I had a certain collection of t-shirts that say I wore, because those are the t-shirts I have, and then somebody came up to me and they're like, look, and they showed me a t-shirt that was like bright red and, I don't know, covered in geckos or something. I don't know. Something I normally typically wouldn't choose if it was me at the rack going, that, and they're like, here, I bought you something. And I was just like, nah, ugh. That is the problem. That's the problem. Because otherwise it's just a fucking shirt, right? It's just a shirt. That's the whole point. But we assign meaning and preference and value and all of that stuff. Oh, I couldn't imagine seeing myself in that. Try it. It's kind of like when I first shaved my head, right? It looked fucking weird. Still looks weird to some degree, but now it's a weird that I'm used to. So now it's normal. See how that works? Like, that's the whole thing. It's never what it is. It's always I wanted to mention this earlier, actually, about your recognition that the concept isn't what's being described. I thought that was great, because you had a recognition that the concept of the concept not being the described was not the described. So you look beyond the concept of the concept. I thought it was great. I was like, that's exactly the point, right? It's never what we're saying. It's always something beyond that. And beyond that is that state where it's just like fucking shit flying at you. It's the process of intelligence. That's what we're trying to tap into, is the beyond that concept, beyond the recognition. The description's not described. You can mouth that shit all day long. But if you don't actually sit there and go, oh, that's not a squirrel, then you're not actually getting it, right? And that's the point, is that it's what lies beyond the concept that we're trying to tap into. And I wanted to bring this up quickly, because I know we're wrapping up in like 10 minutes here, but I talked to somebody else before the weekend, and it's really important, and I want to make this clear to everyone, okay? This conversation's great. Question things, go through the process, tap into all of that, and occasionally don't. Occasionally, go and find something that requires you to pay attention to what you're doing. It doesn't matter what it is. Go and find something that requires you to pay attention to what you're doing. Take up slacklining. Go for a bike ride. If you have something you need to build, grab a hammer and some nails and focus on the nailing, right? Because if you don't focus, you're going to hit yourself in the thumb. Maybe the point is to do something that requires you to stop focusing on the process all the time and embody the lessons that you've come up to so far. Okay, because you can practice and try and memorize all these concepts until you're blue in the face, and they'll never do a fucking thing for you if you don't actually go and use them in an instance in your life. That's what sets them in. That's what decides, oh, I'm getting this now, and it moves you to the next set of doors. Okay? Application is the big part of this. Okay? Philosophy is the disease for which it should be the cure. The conversation is here for the experience of the conversation, not the concepts that are being passed on. It's the experience that's important. Okay. And sometimes that experience is not a conversation. And that's the point. It's just about your attention. So sometimes if you're getting too lost in the concepts, if you're getting too lost in the searching for the truth, go and smell the flowers, because that's the truth. And it's just the practice of aligning with it and appreciating it and deepening that experience that this is really all about. There's a balance. Practice. Find something that challenges you and makes you pay attention with everything you've got. That's where you'll find your triggers. That's where you're going to find your irritation, your frustration, your stress, your tension, your fear. That's where you get to apply all this stuff. That's where it really settles in. You have to find that challenge. Otherwise, this is all just lip service.
Yeah, it's with the conversation and that, like, going through those experiences and experiences when you're paying attention, it adds to everything that you can eventually discuss. So it's like being in the experience and that being it. And then the discussion, they inform each other for sure. But a lot of people prioritize the discussion. And that's where the majority of, the experience lies. And it's not a should by any means, but that's going to dry out. It's like the experience of paying attention is the lifeblood of the conversation. If the conversation is being had without paying attention and having the fullness of the experience, which can be had, like I'm having both right now, paying attention and having the conversation. And that is possible as well. But when it's there to get you to a spot, it's like that is almost, not that it's draining energy, but when it is just philosophizing for the sake of philosophizing, it is almost draining. And then when you get back into it and go and smell the roses or whatever, or go and, go on a walk even, and just, without listening to anything and just paying attention to reality, like that kind of refills where that energy comes from. Like that's where the lifeblood of the conversation comes from, because it's not only the energy and not being so caught up in thinking, but it also allows you to just continue to gain experiences that you can discuss, and it informs the insights. Like, yeah, you can have hypothetical ideas of how a situation may go, or you can fucking step into it and be like, let's find out how this goes. Let's have this experience. But a lot of times we'll conceptualize it. And I get caught in this sometimes too, like thinking, oh, I know there's a consequence to this or whatever. And so you avoid it. Whereas it's like, that's not it. Like there is, even in the experiences where there are consequences, there is so much that is learned as well. And as like, if you're able to continue to pay attention through any of those experiences, like there's a lot to derive from them. And then, I almost sneezed again, but yeah, so basically the experiences inform the conversation. And if it's the other way around, that the conversation is going to dry out and lose its like veracity or tenacity quite quickly, because that can be another habitual thing, and that can be another, like anything is conceptualizable. Is that a word? Conceptualizable. Everything could be, and even, the conversation about concepts not being truth can become this sort of dead thing. And so the experience of just paying attention is imperative, to say the least.
And right there, you've come up with the reason for my quote unquote passion radar. To me, there's emotion that goes with actually living in the fire of what this is, of actually experiencing reality. There's a whole emotional spectrum. To be able to actually just like buffer that out and always be pleasant and talking like this to people and hello, my friends, or any of those things, it's fucking brutal. You're just like, Jesus Christ, are you medicated? What is happening? And it's just because there's so much in what you're feeling. To do that is almost a disservice to how much you are. It's okay to experience things. It's okay to have emotions. It's okay to go back and forth and feel passionate and get really fucking worked up about things, as long as you're not taking yourself too fucking seriously. That's the whole point. But the point is that we're all in that. How good is it to come from on high and have this perfect image of yourself as this beatific monk, talking to people like you've never once experienced frustration or had to pinch out a particularly difficult deuce. Like you're really, like you're talking like your life has never experienced challenge, like everything is wonderful. And it's like, it's okay to just have a normal fucking conversation. It's okay to be a person. There's no such thing as this enlightened monk, because that sounds like a prison in itself. One that has very little laughter, right? Very little authenticity after a while. It sounds very important. A lot of people are going to look up to that, right? But that's different than feeling fulfilled and whole and free. So, I mean, you can go for that if you want to, or you can experience the whole spectrum with responsibility and awareness, ride it out, and really see how intense it is and live in awe, genuine awe of everything that you experience. And it's just because you're not in the way, calling it what you expected, what you conceptualize, what you assume. It's what it is. And therefore, it's a constantly deepening experience.
It really is. And yeah, fucking A, all that shit, like all the monk stuff is, I get where your thoughts about that come from, because it is a component, but there's still something trying to be done or had, or this assumption that there's a right way to live, or there's a should, and it's just another prison. Like it's just another conceptual prison. Just no matter how deeply they get it, it's like you can see things deeply and still at the depths of that run to something, like still kind of keep a hand on the wall. And so it's there. You're not really holding on, but it's there. And that's the maintenance of those repetitive type behaviors. And so it's interesting how that can come up from any sort of quote unquote depth of the conversation. There's still always like, all right, yeah, I just want to see where that wall is. Let's maintain that at least. It's like, you don't have to do that. You don't have to. You can just let go.
Absolutely. Like I would love to sit down and have a rip on a bong with the Dalai Lama. That'd be great. Just chill, have a good giggle, right? Just for the sake of it, but like lose the robes, get some shorts, here's some flip-flops, chill the fuck out, that kind of thing. Just because that would be probably the deepest experience you could probably have with that person, is just to be with them, right? Without any of the pretense. Because I mean, even you and I, like, and we would go out of our ways to say like, don't look up to us. People still come to the table sometimes with this idea. Like, somebody asked me the other day, like, do you still experience your ego? Yeah, like we're kind of friends. Like it's one of those things. It's along for the ride, like that kind of thing. But there's this idea that we don't, because there's this idea of what we don't want to be anymore. I don't want to suffer anymore. You don't look like you're suffering. Therefore, you must be free of all of the shit that I currently think is my problem. Right. And that's the assumption. And that's not the case. It's not that we're free of it. It's that we look it square in the face and don't allow it to influence us. That's really what it is. Right. And anything that does influence us, because we're looking at square in the face, we have a better chance of seeing. And that's really all it's about. This has been a fun episode. We should call it like hay fever or something, just because, you know, you've been having a hell of a time. I'm sure I'll have my time at some point. We're going to wrap up here. We're going to continue on in 15 minutes on patreon.com/dualistic unity. Free trial for tier 2. It's a tier 2 call today, so do join us if you can. And if not, we'll be back tomorrow morning, same time, for another episode of Raw.